In my everyday life,
All
while I
right,
was
guys,
writing
we got
manuscript for this book,
Wayne
I
Dyer
was blessed
kills
to
it.
experience firsthand how this
I've
process
read
works.
his books, listening
I've
to his
chosen to hear
audio
these
books.
miraculous
This
occurrences
is great.
in a very special way.
Get through it. I want you guys to
As I
listen
begin
to
my
this
8th
at
decade
least
here on
one
planet
time
Earth,
a
I
week.
find myself looking
You will
back at the
change
more
your
notable
life
influences in my
in
life that
30
seem
days.
to
You
show
listen
up.
to it 4 times.
And from this distance, I can
and
see
your
the
life will
impact they
change.
had in
You
reversing
will
the
change.
ego was taking
Enjoy.
at those earlier times. When these exceptional signal events or people materialized in my past,
don't forget to
I
hit
was
my
unable,
cash
as
app.
most of us are unable
It's
at the
down
time,
below.
to access the
Support
larger
me.
perspective
Thank
of
you.
what was actually happening. Now, from this perspective of looking back and writing about how to live a wishes-fulfilled life from a spiritual vantage point, I see those events as the pieces of a puzzle in a grand tapestry that is awe-inspiring and very meaningful to me today. St. Francis. One person who showed up in my life was a man who lived back in the 13th century and is now known as St. Francis of Assisi. I wasn't raised in any particular religious faith, probably because of being moved around to different foster homes during my childhood. I had no knowledge of Catholicism and was never exposed to any of the saints or their teachings. But for some mysterious, but much less mysterious to me today, reason, this monk who lived such an inspiring, Christ-conscious life was to be one of the truly most portentous and impactful beings to ever cross my life path. St. Francis's influence in my life in a large, beautifully framed print of the entire prayer of St. Francis, which was given to me by someone at a lecture more than 25 years ago. The messages of the prayer resonated with me profoundly, and I loved how it appeared, so I hung it in a hallway that led to my children's bedrooms. I must have walked by that prayer at least 10,000 times in the decade that it hung there. Often I'd pause, read a few lines, and then contemplate the magic in the words, "Where there is hatred, let me sow love, and where there is darkness, let me bring light." Those words seem more like a technology than a prayer. I love thinking that hatred could grow into love and darkness could be illuminated, not by asking God to do it, but by being love and light. It seemed to promise that we humans had the ability to literally change suffering and pain by transforming ourselves, and I enjoyed contemplating that achievement. But from this vantage point, I can see that I wasn't yet ready to live St. Francis's message or even write it in the way that I've succeeded with this book. Nevertheless, Francesco di Pietro Bernardone, who lived between 1181 and 1226, had come into my life, and his influence slowly began to engulf me as the years passed. I was persuaded to go to Assisi in the 1990s, and while I was there, I felt in some unexplainable way that I was home. I walked in the fields where Francesco walked. I meditated in the same little chapel where he prayed. I stood at his tomb, and I was mesmerized by the overwhelming feeling in my body that I was one with this man who had lived 800 plus years before my own birth. I began to read about Francesco and was extremely moved by his burning desire to fulfill his own dharma, alongside his determination not to let anything impede his dream. I too have felt that inner call to do the work I've done all these years. I too have had periods of being off the path, and always that inner voice bringing me back to writing and living each day to my divine mission. About a decade ago, I knew I was going to write a book titled "There's a Spiritual Solution to Every Problem," but I was unclear about how to organize this undertaking. In a deep meditation, I heard a strong voice say, "Base it on the prayer of St. Francis that hangs on the wall of your home." It was a moment of such clarity and such pure vision that I felt as if the book was already written. All I had to do was let myself be an instrument of thy peace. I returned again to Assisi and had another miraculous experience. I experienced a healing in my body that to this day remains a mystery to me and my medical doctor friends as well. I related the story of this healing and my vision of St. Francis in my movie, The Shift. Once again, this 13th century monk had transformed my life by appearing to me and showing me that there are no limits to what can take place when one is living from a God-realized perspective. I went on to write the book effortlessly after taking copious notes on my second visit to Assisi. Furthermore, the subject matter of "There's a Spiritual Solution to Every Problem" became a public television special and millions of people had the teachings of St. Francis brought into their homes because of my calling to write about these profoundly life-transforming truths. Years ago, I found myself drawn to the fictional recreation of St. Francis of Assisi, written by one of the greatest writers of our time, Costanzakis. And to this day, I still read from this amazing novel titled St. Francis regularly, and always find myself moved to tears and higher consciousness by its contents. About a year ago, I had another strong calling during a deep meditation to take a group of people to 3 spiritual cities in Europe: Lourdes in France, Medjugorje in Bosnia-Herzegovina, and of course Assisi in Italy. We called this journey Experiencing the Miraculous, and 162 people from all over the globe signed on to visit these holy places where genuine miracles have taken place in the 13th, the 19th, and the 20th centuries. I offered a 2-hour lecture in each of these remarkable places, and in our opening night gathering in Assisi, I told everyone that we were truly fulfilling the vision of St. Francis. His objective was to bring Christ consciousness awareness to the entire world, one parish, one city, one country at a time. On this trip, we had people from every continent, representing all age groups, teenagers to octogenarians, all professions, all religious persuasions, all same ideas, to assist our world in being one that is populated by people who desire to make me an instrument of thy peace, and thus create such a world from our deepest wishes desiring to be fulfilled. On our second day in Assisi, on my 3rd visit to this divine city, all 162 people gathered in an ancient church built hundreds of years ago, when Francesco lived there and began the Franciscan order. As my 2-hour talk was winding down in this holy building, something happened to me that I'd never, ever experienced in all 4 decades of public lectures. I felt something take over my body, and I was rendered speechless. I was doing a reading from Costanzakis' St. Francis, and at the end, I simply froze. My body wouldn't move. I broke into almost furious sobbing, and the entire audience stood up and stretched out their hands to me in silence. Everyone knew that a truly metaphysical happening was transpiring. By the way, the entire trip was filmed, including this and 2 other lectures, and you can see it all for yourself if you so desire by viewing the Experiencing the Miraculous 4-DVD set that is produced by Hay House. It's an opportunity to visit all of these cities and really experience it firsthand. Many photographs were taken of me speaking beneath a portrait of Jesus Christ in the church, and I've included one in the photo insert so that you might view the very large orb that made its appearance at that transfixing lecture in the Holy Church in Assisi. You will learn more about these orbs later in this book. What I can say with certainty is that I once again felt in my body the power of St. Francis. I experienced him not only by his words and not only around me, but in me, as 162 people, whom I feel were a catalytic group for the purpose of fulfilling a collective dharma, originating in a thought in my imagination, and now an active force for good in our world. Looking back at my life, at the events that brought St. Francis into my life, it seems clear that I didn't really recognize the significance of them at the time. I simply did what I felt I was called to do. And I must say that Francesco didn't just come into my life with a message to prompt my own spiritual awakening. He actually took it over, and he actually changed the course that my life was taking at the time. He lived in me most of the time. I'm going to leave St. Francis here for a moment and relate the presence of another luminous being who arrived in my life about 6 years ago. Lao Tzu. Back in 2005, I became reacquainted with the ancient spiritual text, the Tao Te Ching, narrated some 2,500 years ago by an ancient Chinese master, Lao Tzu. Some have called this small book containing 81 short verses the wisest book ever written. While I had a cursory awareness of the Tao, it was by no means a significant teaching in my life. Yet I noticed that at the age of 65, I kept reading and receiving messages from the Tao Te Ching, which translates loosely to the Book of Living the Virtue of the Great Way. I was familiar with some of the most quoted passages from the text and had even used them in my previously published books, But now, in 2005, for some reason, I seem to be bombarded by them almost on a daily basis. In a restaurant, several lines from the Tao appeared on the menu. I heard more quotations on a couple of TV shows. In a bookstore, a translation was misplaced on a shelf right next to one of my books. A close friend told me a story of how he claimed to be a Taoist and the peace that it brought him. And someone I didn't know sent me a card deck containing each of the 81 brief verses, along with a drawing of Lao Tzu sitting on an oxen. And the likeness seemed to speak to me like no drawing ever had before. Then one morning in my meditation, I felt a strong inner calling to read the entire Tao Te Ching, and I did so that very day. That evening, I called my publisher and said I'd like to write a brief essay on each of the 81 verses on how to apply the ancient wisdom of Lao Tzu to today's modern world, and I'd like to publish it as one volume titled Change Your Life. From that moment on, I began to feel the same relationship with Lao Tzu as I had been having with St. Francis for the previous decade or so. I began to hear this man speaking to me in my early morning meditations. I mentioned this on my weekly radio show on hayhouseradio.com, and an artist named Magali told me on the air that she'd channeled Tzu that she'd produced in a frenzy of automatic painting, and she was going to send it to me. The painting arrived via overnight delivery, and I literally talked to this likeness for the entire year of 2006. Each week, I spent 4.5 days studying, meditating, intellectualizing, and analyzing a verse of the Tao Te Ching. On the half day, after meditating with the painting of Lu, I simply let the words flow onto the pages. I spent the entire year of 2006 communing with Lao Tzu, gazing at his portrait and watching how eyes seemed to follow me as I moved about my writing space. And most significantly, listening and letting the words flow through my heart and onto the page. My year of being steeped in the Tao Te Ching was truly life-altering. I learned and practiced the essential messages of humility, living the mystery, contentment, simplicity, serenity, and finding God in nature rather than in orthodoxy. Lao Tzu became my constant companion, and the Tao Te Ching not only guided me to a more enlightened way of life, it did so for millions of others as well. The Public Broadcasting Service, PBS, allowed me to present the essence of Lao Tzu's ancient messages on a pledge show that aired thousands of times, often in prime time, in every major market in the United States and Canada. Somehow, in some mysterious way known only by the invisible Tao or the one divine mind, I became an instrument for getting these powerful messages out to large numbers of people 25 centuries after the passing of Lao Tzu. St. Francis and Lao Tzu and their teachings are still hugely consequential in my life every day. But more than being these momentous spiritual teachers, their appearances in my life have impacted countless others, including you, as you embark on listening to this book. Brenda's letter. I'm now going to share a remarkable letter that I received a few days ago as I was preparing to write the opening pages of Wishes Fulfilled. Please listen to it with an open mind, and then allow me to explain the relevance it has for you as you begin the actual listening of this book. And here's the letter. Dear Dr. Wayne, miracles happen. I feel compelled to share with you an experience I had very recently because you were a part of the miracle that I experienced. Several months ago, I heard about your Experiencing the Miraculous tour, and I knew that I had to be a part of it. Life for me is complicated right now as I go through a great big shift, and so for me to work out the logistics of going on the European tour was likely to take a miracle. But I was open to anything. I stated my intention out loud. I said, I intend to experience the miraculous with Dr. Wayne. And then I left to God to come up with the hows. A few months passed and my situation was slow to change, so my trip was not booked. I continued to have faith and to know that I would experience the miraculous with you, even if reality kept saying, not very likely. In the beginning of April, my busy schedule had me traveling with my 14-year-old daughter, Emily, to Kelowna in British Columbia for her singing festival. It's an 8-hour where I live, but she's very passionate about opera. So giving her the opportunity to go to Kelowna to work with some experts was certainly my pleasure. My parents happened to live there too, so I called them to tell them we were coming. I talked to Mom for a few minutes and told her when we would be arriving and chatted about this and that when I heard Dad mumbling something in the background. Mom interpreted it for me. Quote, "Your dad says Dr. Wayne Dyer will be in Vernon Tuesday night if you want to go see him." Well, after I picked the phone and myself up off of the floor, I asked Dad if he would be my date, and I went online and bought tickets. Needless to say, I was thrilled that God would be so kind as to bring you to me instead of getting me to go to Europe. The night of your lecture came, and I eagerly sat in the 14th row. When you walked on stage and started to talk, something weird happened. It had happened once before when I saw a young boy sing Ave Maria, and a huge halo of light appeared around him. At first I had thought I was getting a migraine, but the light was only around the young boy. The same light was surrounding you. No matter where you moved on the stage, the light followed you, and only you. I thought it might be the stage lights or the ambient atmosphere in the arena, but there was no halo around the lady who introduced you. Then something even stranger happened. Dr. Wayne, you were talking about St. Francis, and before my very eyes, you transformed. Your body was clad in a long robe, and your features transformed so that you actually were St. Francis of Assisi. It lasted for only a moment, but it was powerful, emotional, and very, very real. And then something even stranger happened. You began to talk about Lao Tzu, and you also transformed into him. A long braid trailed down your back, and I could see your face completely transform into Lao Tzu. Again, it only lasted for a moment, but the experience will last with me forever. At the intermission, Dad went to the restroom, and I stood up to stretch my legs and to dry my eyes. I felt a warm hand fill mine, and I looked down to see a little lady, very old, and with a wonderful smile, and she was urging me to sit beside her. I sat, and she stared straight into my eyes. She told me staring at me because I was glowing with light, and she felt like she was watching an angel. I was transfixed by her eyes, thinking that I knew her somehow because I recognized her twinkly green eyes. She and I talked, and at times saying the very same thing at the same time, things like, "We are all the same," and "There is only love," and other deeply spiritual things. It felt like a dream. And before we knew it, you were back on stage again, creating your magic. I decided I need to perpetuate contact with her and would get her name and number after the show. Despite my good intentions, when the show ended and we got up to leave, she had just simply disappeared. This surprised me because she'd been sitting 2 seats away from me and I never saw her leave. Dad and I left, and as I was backing the car up in the parking lot, I caught sight of my own eyes in the rearview mirror. And that's when I realized where I had seen those twinkly green eyes before. Impossible? Maybe. And maybe not. I have no explanation for any of the things that I experienced that night, but every day I give thanks that I was able to experience the miraculous with Dr. Wayne in such a unique and lovely way. Namaste, Brenda Babinski. Now, if you're wondering about her twinkly green eyes reference, it makes perfect sense to me because I readily recall Marceline, the mother of 7 of my children, telling me of her experience giving birth to her firstborn son, Shane. In the hospital, she was struggling in labor and didn't wish to use anesthesia. A nurse with this red hair came up to her side, wiped her brow, spoke soothingly and lovingly to her of how to breathe, and stayed with her throughout the entire birth process. When she inquired the next day about this wonderful, helpful nurse and how she could properly thank her, she was told that no one of that description had ever worked in that hospital. Angelic guidance? Perhaps. And Brenda's encounter with her very old little lady may also have been an encounter with her highest self. You'll hear more about this in Chapter 3. I include Brenda's letter here in the beginning to give you a sense of what is possible when you begin to assume the feeling of a wish fulfilled, as I detailed in Chapter 6. My first thought upon reading Brenda's words from my ego, which declared, "Yeah, you were probably Lao and then St. Francis in 2 of your previous lives, and why not? Look how important you are, and all that you are doing to make this a more spiritually awakened place." Then I talked by telephone with author Anita Moorjani in Hong Kong and read her the letter, and she quickly put my ego-driven thoughts to rest. She said that her experience of being on the other side was perfectly clear on one thing. Everything is happening at once. There is no past, no future, only one, and only now. And that the closest she could ever come to this idea was that there are parallel lives. Now, I know how perplexing it is to contemplate this idea of no past, no future, and no linear consciousness, especially since the brain, which is the only thing we have to do this contemplating with, is in a body that is linear and did have a beginning and will have an end. It is simply one of the great mysteries, this idea of everything happening at once. Yet in my dream state, and occasionally in deep meditation, I've had a glimpse of this non-linearity. I urge you to read Anita's book. It's called Dying to Be Me, to gain perhaps a bit more understanding of how the now and oneness appear to her as she embarked upon her healing journey away from a certain death prognosis. As you listen to Wishes Fulfilled, I encourage you to take notice of the importance of being able to feel in your body what you desire to manifest. Pay particular attention to what it means to know within that you are truly a divine being here in the material world of ours on earth. I repeatedly emphasize in the words that follow the importance of your imagination in creating a wishes fulfilled life. But your imagination is strictly a domain that's controlled by your thinking process. Once you place a thought into your imagination about who you want to become, I encourage you to live from that end as if it had already materialized into the physical realm. And this is precisely what I've been doing with the teachings of both St. Francis and Lao Tzu for many years now, living their messages intellectually, writing about them, lecturing on them, analyzing them, interpreting them, all in my imagination. But now, at this time in my life, I've gone beyond my intellect when it comes to the teachings of these divine masters. When I appeared on stage that evening in Vernon, British Columbia, and when I spoke to that audience in Assisi, and I felt myself becoming overwhelmed by the presence of St. Francis, I was feeling them in my body, living their messages as if they were me, or in other words, assuming the feeling of the wish to know their truths as already fulfilled. And when you are able to passionately feel whatever it is that you wish to have or become, as long as it is aligned with your highest self, that is, with God, you become it, and it becomes you. When I teach these profound messages, they are way beyond an intellectual exercise. I feel them, and this is what Brenda Babinski observed in those fleeting moments while I was on stage. Imagine it. Live as if it were your reality. Allow no detractors, but most important, assume the feeling of it, and you will merge with it, and it will merge with you, so that it is no longer a duality. It is becoming one with what you desire. That same night Brenda came to see me, as I sat on stage and I signed books, the entire hockey arena where I was speaking was filled with orbs, as if to confirm the convergence of the truths of both St. Francis and Lao Tzu. As I assumed the feeling of these spiritual truths in the core of my being, those orbs also appeared in photographs at the church in Assisi, where I felt in my body the presence of Francis as I stood and spoke, where he had actually lived and spoken in the 13th century. I do not believe that my being seen by an audience member as actually transforming into these great teachers is an indication that I might have lived as them many centuries ago. I know that when you begin to go beyond the intellect and feel the presence of what you most desire as an already present fact and live from it with unabated passion, you merge into it and come to know the truth that the laws of the material world do not apply in the presence of the God realized. Nicolette. I've chosen to relate one additional story here in the beginning of Wishes Fulfilled that brings home the most salient feature of this book. That is, that there exists within all of us a divine spark called the I am that I am. And when it is kindled and nourished It is capable of miracle making at an astonishing level. In May of 2011, I met a group of women, including a mother and her 20-year-old daughter, while on a walk along the ocean front on Maui. Linda, the mom, recognized me, and we began a brief conversation. As I looked at her daughter, Nicolette, it was obvious that she was suffering from some kind of facial paralysis that had distorted her features. The muscle activity in the entire left side of her face appeared to be frozen. Something motivated me to reach out and touch her face and ask what was happening. And then began a saga that I've chosen, with permission from both of them, to relate here in this book to give you a sampling of what is possible when we use the inherent power that is a part of our very essence, called the I Am Presence, for the fulfillment of our divinely aligned wishes. I felt called to invite the entire group of women into my home and to talk to Nicolette about the wishes fulfilled teachings that I was channeling and writing about each and every day, and had been doing so for several months. I spent an hour or so with Nicolette while her mother, grandmother, and two of Linda's friends stayed in the background. During this time, I felt in my body that something stupefying and mystical was energizing not only me, but the entire room. At the end of our time together, I insisted that Nicolette spend an hour with my friend Kate McKinnon, a craniosacral therapist who was visiting and offering me what's called CST treatments, craniosacral therapy. I had set up an appointment for myself with Kate for the following day. I gave my appointment to Nicolette, and what follows are two descriptions of the event that transpired. The first is Linda's words to Kate about her understanding of the entire experience. This is Linda's mom writing to Kate. Hi, Kate. I wanted to tell you that before Hawaii, Nicolette did not know of Wayne Dyer at all. She is a university student consumed with classes, assignments, work, and parties, and has never been to his lectures or even read his book. She still knows very little of him other than she is now reading The Power of Intention. On Saturday, I arrived in Hawaii with my husband, Gord, and son, Jason. Nicolette called me from Victoria, BC, the next day. She said she had experienced a weird headache the night before, and now her face was going numb on the left side. She was having difficulty smiling on one side and was worried. She sent a picture of herself from her phone, and we told her to go to the emergency room now and get it looked at, or it may be a stroke or something. Nicolette didn't want to go because she said she had too much schoolwork to do. She had final exams to study for. She didn't feel well enough to go. And I insisted that we needed a professional assessment. She went and was triaged immediately through and given a battery of tests. She called me about an hour later and said she was diagnosed with a very severe case of Bell's palsy, cause unknown. They had theories of causes, but didn't see the other physical effects of these causes, and so the doctors were stumped by her condition. She was given prophylactic antiviral medication and high doses of prednisone. It not being a life-threatening condition, they said, sorry, this is all we can do. Time will tell. And Nicolette was beside herself with grief. She called us and was so upset. We suggested that if doctors said it was okay, then she could come to Hawaii or I'd fly home to be with her. She spent the next 2 days seeing different physicians, making sure she could travel. She arrived in Hawaii on Tuesday. We could see that her paralysis was worse when she arrived. It was definitely progressing. It worsened for several days thereafter. I was in contact with our doctor at home and sent him another picture of Nicolette in full paralysis. He told me that based on what he saw in the photo, it was a very severe case. He told us to be prepared that there's a strong possibility that she may only partially recover from this, or perhaps not at all. And furthermore, that this type of palsy, called Ramsay Hunt, can be quite painful and may have nasty side effects from the nerve damage that has been done. At the doctor's request, we went to the local drugstore and purchased full coverage eye patches and eye lubrications so her left eye would not ulcerate, as it was no longer even closing. A week or so passed, paralysis continued, no movement, nor any taste sensation on her left side of her tongue. Her left eyebrow nerves were blown out, eyes couldn't close, nostril and mouth affected as well. She was having difficulty chewing. Nicolette was in a state of stress, distress, and shooting pain. The universe intervenes. We meet Dr. Wayne Dyer on the promenade. We spend about an hour with Wayne in his condo. Wayne was totally focused on Nicolette's state of mind and on healing. She was wanting to heal right now, She was being told that she has the power to heal, but didn't know how to get to the place to tap into that healing. Wayne put his hands on her face and spoke to her over and over again, the same words until she got it. I am paralysis free. My girlfriends in the background were crying. I was awestruck. As we were leaving his condo, Wayne insisted that Nicolette simply must, have a session with his CST therapist the next day. Since time was an issue, he gave his appointment to Nicolette, and he made the arrangements. Nicolette came into the therapy session with much gratitude and the new thinking that she will be healed. But she said that one of her barriers to healing was that she couldn't get to a place of completely letting go and letting God, because she was in a fight or flight mode. How can I get to a state of physical relaxation and heal when I don't know how to relax my body? I recall she expressed these concerns to you, and you understood what she was saying. You asked her, as Wayne had asked her too, what was going on in her life before this had happened. She said, nothing. I was studying for my final exams in economics, and at the same time, I needed to create a painting for my art class and to write an essay. My roommate is moving out, and also I'm anxiously waiting to find out if I'm going to be accepted at McGill University in Montreal. Lots on my plate, but I'm handling it. You said to her, Nicolette, that isn't nothing. That is a lot of something. We see here how the mind and mind-fulfilled stress can affect the body. This is the mind-body connection, or rather disconnection. Once we got back to Vancouver, Nicolette and I met with our family doctor. He told my daughter that this was indeed a very moderate case. To translate by his expression and from what he had told me over the phone in Hawaii, it was actually severe. Nicolette knew what he meant. She knew it was severe, but it didn't bother her because, as far as she was concerned, she was healing. Our family doctor then went on to provide statistics of different levels of recovery and to prepare us that this type of paralysis can take 2 years or more to come back from, if you do come back at all. We were to schedule another appointment in 4 weeks where Nicolette would be referred to a neurologist. I can't say for sure when she actually had visible improvement, for she went back almost immediately to the University of Victoria to make up all the work that she had missed while in Hawaii. She went back with the confidence of simply moving forward. I was surprised that she was leaving us and getting right back into her university life after what our family doctor had said, and given that she was still, no matter what I thought or what I said, in true Nicolette conviction, she continued to me, Mom, you don't get it. Didn't you hear what Wayne said? I am healed and paralysis free. Didn't you hear me say that too? What part of that don't you understand? I am healed. It's just that you and everybody else in this world can't see it yet. 4 weeks later, she is paralysis free. Namaste, Linda. That was Linda's letter to Kate. The words, I am healed and I am paralysis free, that Nicolette spoke, even though the physical evidence strongly indicated otherwise, may sound strange or may even sound absurd to you as you listen to this. But I assure you they will make sense as you listen to Wishes Fulfilled. The second description is Nicolette's actual recollection in a letter that she wrote to her craniosacral therapist, Kate McKinnon. And this is what Nicolette said. Hi, Kate. Thank you so much for letting my mom know about Dr. Dyer's radio show today. My family and I listened to it this evening, and I am so grateful that you made it possible for all of us to hear those wonderful things. This is truly and has been an amazing experience. I can't thank you enough for all that you have done. Initially, at the time of my diagnosis with Bell's palsy on the first day of spring, I just could not move the left side of my bottom lip as much as I could the right side. 4 days later, I couldn't move the entire left side of my face at all. I couldn't even close my left eye and had to tape it shut every night. I could see my paralysis getting worse every day, no matter how much I thought it would get better. I came to the conclusion that I had no control over the left side of my face. I was told that I might not ever recover from this, and if I do, it could take years. I became miserable. I felt broken. I was suffering. I met Dr. Dyer the day before I was leaving Maui. I didn't know who he was or what he was about. After Dr. Dyer learned of my condition, he put his hand over my face and introduced the idea that I have the power to heal myself. All I have to do is to think about how I feel when I am paralysis free. I thought about a friend taking a picture of me a year ago and me having no paralysis. I was smiling. It was then explained that the physical is a representation of what starts out in the mind, in my imagination, of what I want to be physically. Manifestation and healing began here. I began to think that if I changed my thought process and thought only connecting myself with the knowing that I am paralysis-free, eventually the physical will reflect my new mindset. Dr. Dyer then said that he highly recommended I have a session with you, and he gave me your number. And I called you, and with the generosity and kindness of Dr. Dyer, I had a session with you the very next day. Right after meeting Dr. Dyer, I had difficulty trying to connect to the thought of being paralysis-free because it was so prominent in me in everything that I did. I couldn't chew properly. I couldn't taste very well or pronounce some words without feeling uncomfortable. My eyes were always dry during the day, and at night I had to tape it shut after putting this lube in it. I also had so much on my mind. I had 2 finals in 1 week's time worth more than 60% of my grade, and I had to maintain a certain GPA to stay in my program at the University of Victoria and to still have a good chance of getting into McGill University. In addition, I had to figure out living accommodations in 3 weeks. I had so much to think about, and I felt so uncomfortable in everything I did because of my paralysis. I was holding on to the stress of it all, still focusing on the Bell's palsy. I didn't want it to have a negative impact on my life, but it was. The next day, I had a session with you. You asked what was going on in my life before this happened. I said nothing, everything was fine. I felt I was doing well on my time management with my studies, keeping up with my assignments in economics, computer science, and art class. My roommate was moving out, and I was also. I was anxiously waiting to find out if I was going to be accepted to McGill University. I knew it seemed like a lot, but I didn't feel the stress of it. I even remember thinking that I should feel more stressed out than I actually did. And you said to me, Nicolette, that isn't nothing. This is a lot of something. We see here how stress hurts the body. This is the mind-body connection, or more like disconnection. I laid down and the healing began. You started by putting your hands on my ankles. You were asking my mom some questions about where we were from, etc. It made me feel more comfortable, as this was something I had never heard of or even imagined I would be doing. I didn't know how to think of the situation, so I started thinking about how I could make this session as beneficial as possible. I thought about what Dr. Dyer had said to me the day before and what I had read in Anita Moorjani's near-death experience article. I constantly told myself I am paralysis-free and thought about the picture of me a year ago smiling. You asked me if I liked the ocean, and I replied yes. You told me to listen to the sound of the waves crashing against the sand on the shore. I remember hearing the calming sound of the waves and looking up at the white ceiling. Looking at the ceiling, it was almost as if my body was now numb, and I could no longer feel your hands, which were now touching my legs. When you got to my rib cage on my left side, you asked me if I had stomach pains. I explained that I had some extreme pain in the stomach region after every time I ate something, but I thought it was caused by the medication I had to take for my Bell's palsy. However, I finished my medication a week ago and I'm still having pain there. You focused around my stomach and rib cage. I was looking up at the ceiling. I began to feel pressure right underneath my rib cage, but was unsure if I should say something. Then you said, if you feel any pressure anywhere, let me know. Immediately I felt more pressure in that spot, so I said so. I was staring at the ceiling and it began to change colors. You asked me if the pain was a shape. What shape would it be? And what color? I said it would be an oval and yellow. You asked if this oval had a name. Nothing came to me. Therefore, you said, we can call it yellow oval, and asked me if this oval is working with me. I felt like it was working against me and said that. You said, that's no good, and I remember agreeing in my thoughts. You told me to talk to this yellow oval and ask if we can work together, so I did just that. Then, seconds later, I felt it gone. Almost as if the oval had burst into a million pieces floating all over my body and I became one with it. I felt a state of complete relaxation. After that experience, I would say that you helped me realize this control I have over my body. You helped me jumpstart the communication between my mind and my body. I was introduced to the notion of how my mind and body are one. I remember hearing the waves, repeatedly telling myself, I am paralysis-free. You got to my head. I felt your fingers right at the top of my spine, at the top of my neck. You kept your hands there for a while, it seemed. Then I felt my lower back touch the surface of what I was lying on. I felt as if what was making me feel so uncomfortable all the time had left my body. I took a deep breath, and I vividly remember the air going in so easily. I felt connected to my body. as I could feel the air going in and out so freely. You then focused on the left side of my mouth and kept your fingers on the bottom of my upper left molars for a few minutes. Then you touched the left side of my face. I felt relaxed, and I had the picture of me smiling in my mind. I opened myself up to the notion that you're going to be the catalyst to my healing process. You asked me for a word that will help me heal, and what color it would need. I got the word and the color of light blue, and I repeated them to you. You asked your hand on my face, and imagined my face as a sponge absorbing your energy. I pictured this light blue sponge contracting. I did feel your hand on my face. I saw the sponge in my mind, and I told myself that I am paralysis-free. I was in a state of complete relaxation, picturing the sponge as I felt your hand and heard the waves of the ocean. I felt one with my body, that I had control of my body, and that I was smiling, paralysis-free. You had your hand on my face for what seemed to be about 5 minutes. However, my concept of timing that session could be incorrect. Then you lifted your hand off my face, and I opened my eyes. You were looking down at me and asked me how I felt. I can't remember my response, although I felt relaxed and aware of what was going on in and around my body. I remember you telling me that I grind my teeth on my left side of my mouth, and asked me if something happened to my forehead, which I banged on the roof of my car the day before coming to Hawaii, as I told you later. I remember you telling me that whatever it is I would normally do to relax, I need to do more of it, because that is where the healing actually takes place. The session overall is a blur other than those feelings I described above. At the end, I almost expected to be able to physically smile and be paralysis-free, but when I couldn't, I was a little disappointed. Then, within a matter of minutes after that thought of disappointment had entered my mind, other thoughts poured in, healing thoughts. After putting on the shoes I took off before the session, I noticed a weird feeling in my body, a physical feeling. Something had definitely changed. I felt a sense of peace. I knew my suffering was over. I physically was no longer uncomfortable. I felt excited and filled with energy. I knew I was healing. I knew it. Over the next few weeks, I continued to think about what you had said about how the healing takes place in relaxation. So whenever I felt my senses speaking to me, convincing me that I still have a severe case of facial paralysis, like, for example, when I couldn't pronounce some words properly when speaking to my mom right after the session, I thought of the light blue sponge and the feeling of your hand on my face. Every time I think of that sponge, I am brought back to that place of total relaxation, with the suffering and uncomfortable feeling suddenly lifted from my body. I hear the sound of the waves overpower what my senses tell me, and all that is left in my mind is that picture of me smiling. When I left Maui, I had an overwhelming feeling, an image of healing. I am paralysis-free. I am paralysis-free. I am paralysis-free. Nicolette. And that was Nicolette's letter to Kate. I was scheduled to give an evening lecture in Canada at the Jubilee Auditorium in Calgary, Alberta, some 10 weeks after my first and only encounter with Nicolette. Linda had called me to report that her daughter was completely paralysis-free and that this experience had completely turned her entire life mission around. I called Nicolette, and she excitedly told me how great she felt to have learned at the age of 20 that she had this amazing I am presence within her, and that she wanted to tell everyone she encountered about this profound discovery. I invited her and her mom to come to Calgary and share her experience with the several thousand people I would be speaking to, and indeed she did. In only a few moments, Nicolette transfixed the entire audience, giving real-world, three-dimensional evidence of all that I was that evening. As she left the stage to a standing ovation, she handed me a card with 2 photos imprinted on it. In the photo of the 3 of us in Hawaii, Nicolette, Linda, and me, the left side of her face is paralyzed. In the other photo, Nicolette is smiling in a beautiful dress, paralysis-free, with a distinct orb on her left shoulder. The caption on the card says, "A wish fulfilled. Love, Nicolette and Linda." As you continue listening to this book, which has been such a miraculous journey for me, know that I take no credit for any of it at all. I am reminded of the 1977 film called Oh God, with George Burns as God, saying something to the effect that if you want a miracle, you should try to make a fish from scratch. Only the I Am presence is so equipped. I give full credit to that presence and urge you to know that it is yours to access as well. You can indeed do it from scratch. Part 1, the higher aspects of yourself. Here's a quote that goes with that from John Lennon. Part of me suspects I'm a loser, and part of me thinks I'm God Almighty. Chapter 1, changing your concept of yourself. Display quote. Health, wealth, beauty, and genius are not created. They are only manifested by the arrangement of your mind. That is, by your concept of yourself, and your concept of yourself is all that you accept and consent to as true. And that's by Neville. There's a level of awareness available to you that you are probably unfamiliar with. It extends upward and transcends the ordinary level of consciousness that you're most accustomed to. At this higher plane of existence, which you and every human being who has ever lived can access at will, the fulfillment of wishes is not only probable, it is guaranteed. This chapter is simply a preparation for entering into that realm wherein you have much more say over what comes into your life than you might have envisioned. After 18 months in relative seclusion, studying, meditating, and literally experiencing what it's like to live in this miraculous plane of existence beyond anything that might be labeled ordinary or normal, I've undertaken this joyous task of writing about having wishes fulfilled. I've seen firsthand how virtually every wish or desire I've placed my attention on has transformed from a mental thought into an objective fact. However, I'm not proposing memorizing an esoteric formula leading to a theoretical nirvana. My emphasis throughout this book is that manifestation is real and that it occurs when you make a specific decision to change your mind about who you are and what is possible for you to achieve within these parentheses in eternity called your life. I'm inviting you to be receptive to a radical new idea about yourself. It's radical because ever since you left your mother's womb, you've been subjected to a cultural conditioning designed to help you be content with living a normal life at the level of ordinary consciousness, which generally means accepting whatever life hands you. In many ways, you've been programmed to believe that you do not possess the wisdom or the ability to manifest the fulfillment of your wishes and desires. I am saying as clearly as I know how to say in these opening pages, there's a plane of awareness that you can opt to live at, wherein you can, if you are willing to change your of yourself as an ordinary being, find yourself fulfilling any and all wishes that you have for yourself. Throughout this book, I'll explore with you what I've studied and learned and internalized and practiced and, yes, lived regarding the powers of manifestation. It begins with changing your concept of yourself. I would like to offer a few words on these two concepts of ordinary and extraordinary. Ordinary is, well, it's just so ordinary. It means that you do all things that your culture and your family have programmed you to do. It implies that you fit in, that you study hard, that you follow the rules, that you take care of your obligations, that you fill out the forms and you pay your taxes and you get a job and do what every law-abiding citizen does, and then you retire and you play with your gun and ultimately you die. I want to emphasize that there's absolutely nothing wrong with this scenario. It is perfectly fine, but if it were completely acceptable to you, you wouldn't be listening to this book. Extraordinary encompasses most of ordinary, since we all live in the same physical world. There will always be forms to fill out and rules that demand our obedience and bills to pay and family obligations to attend to. But extraordinary consciousness is associated with your soul, that invisible, boundaryless energy that looks out from behind your eyeballs and has very different interests than your ordinary self does. The ideal of your soul, the thing that it yearns for, is not more knowledge. It is not interested in comparison or winning or light or ownership and not even happiness. The ideal of your soul is space, expansion, and immensity. And the one thing it needs more than anything else is to be free to expand, to reach out, and to embrace the infinite. Why? Because your soul is infinity itself. It has no restrictions or limitations. It resists being fenced in. And when you attempt to contain it with rules and obligations, it is miserable. Yourself is extraordinary because it is a fragment of the universal soul, which is infinite. The part of you that knows you have a greatness and is stirred by the idea of you expanding and removing any and all limitations is what I'm addressing here in Wishes Fulfilled. This is your new self-concept, one that is inspired by your soul. So let's take a look at this idea and then examine what you need to do in order to make your self-concept congruent with how you want to live your life and the powerful role you can begin to assume as a co-fulfiller of all of your rational, sensible wishes and desires. So what is your self-concept? Simply put, your concept of yourself is everything that you believe to be true. And everything that you believe to be true about yourself has landed you precisely where you live and breathe every day of your life. Your beliefs about yourself are like the ingredients in a recipe that you use to create your self-concept. Those ingredients or beliefs fall into two specific categories: your outer self-concept and your inner self-concept. Your outer self-concept. These ingredients include everything you accept as truth concerning what the physical you is capable of. There's probably a certain amount of intellectual acumen that you agree is necessary to your outer self-concept. Smart, perhaps, but not really a genius. More capable in some areas than others, such as technological knowledge. Maybe you add a measure of writing ability, but detect more fluency with numbers and mathematical problem solving than your ability to write prose. Your beliefs about your outer self may be well seasoned and strong in some areas and almost hopelessly incapacitated or weak in others. You very likely have a conceptual framework of just how smart you are and have carried that belief with you since you were a youngster in elementary school. Your outer concept of yourself includes everything you believe about your innate and learned talents and abilities. Your beliefs about your clumsiness, your coordination, your athleticism, your musical and artistic talents, these are all a partial list of the ingredients that comprise the recipe that is you. These descriptors also apply to everything else about your outer self. Your outer self concept includes how you view yourself in relationship to health, your immunity to or inclination toward illnesses of all descriptions. You know if you are prone to being overweight or addicted to various substances such as sugar, caffeine, fat, meat, dairy, and the like. You define yourself as prone to catching colds or immune to such things, likely to gain weight, inclined toward skin rashes, or predisposed to low energy or high sleep requirements. The point is that your outer self-concept comprises essentially everything that you believe your body is capable or incapable of. Given a true-false test on yourself, you'd be able to say with certainty, yes, these things are true about me. They are the beliefs, the ingredients that you use to create you. In addition to your intellect, talents, and physical body traits, you spice up your outer self-conception with your personality traits. You know if you're assertive or shy, loud or quiet, pushy or obsequious, fearful or courageous, daring or frightened. And this is only a partial list of personality descriptors or spices. These individual qualities are interpreted as true in defining yourself and how you function socially. I could continue detailing all of the ingredients that go into making your outer self-concept, but I've chosen to keep this book short, succinct, and to the point. At this point, I'm simply encouraging you to recognize that your self-concept contains a myriad of self-descriptors regarding this thing that you call your physical body, and that you probably regard them as your inner self-concept. This category can be pretty difficult to achieve in optimal proportions in our culture. Your inner self-concept involves your beliefs about the invisible energy and intelligence that is the most significant portion of your being. I've often referred to your inner world as the ghost in the machine. The machine, in my conceptualization, is your body and its five senses, as well as all of the physical components that make up your body. The tissue, the bones, the rivers of fluids, the organs, the teeth, the brain, and everything else are all this machine. And within this machine is an invisible eye that you call mind or spirit, comprised of thoughts that direct the machine. I once had a conversation with a neurosurgeon who was disputing the presence of this invisible world by saying that he'd cut into thousands of bodies and had never seen a soul. I remember his awkward look when I asked him if he'd ever seen a thought while he was poking around inside of a brain. Obviously, there's an invisible inner as well as an outer part of your being. You have a conceptualization of yourself that involves this formless, invisible portion of your being, and you have a pretty specific idea about just how far this inner portion of yourself can take you. You may believe that your thinking apparatus is pretty phenomenal, though not understanding exactly what it is, inside or surrounding you, that allows you to scratch your forehead or pick up a pencil or move your feet on a dance floor, or any of the infinite commands that your mind is capable of directing all day long, every day, and for as long as you are alive. You also have a self-concept about what your inner energetic ghost cannot do. Is it capable of thinking itself out of serious disease, or is that just a lot of nonsense? Can your invisible intelligence, your imagination, perform feats of alchemy? Does your self-concept contain the power to perform great or even magical acts of transformation? Your self-concept is a blend of your beliefs regarding your connection to a higher power. You believe something about the existence or non-existence of God. You have various points of view about how far faith can carry you. Whether or not there is anything within you that you can or cannot rely on to perform mystical or miraculous things is seasoned by your beliefs. You have acquired specific beliefs concerning the power of your mind. You're generally confident that you can rely on your invisibleness to do the ordinary things in life, such as remember an unseen list of items stored somewhere in your memory and run errands on your way home from work. But what do your beliefs cook up about your ability to create miracles? Is healing your body or manifesting a long-desired soulmate an ingredient in your self-concept? Take a moment to examine that unseen list stored away in your mind. Ask yourself, where is it? How did I put it there? Where is the place I'm calling there? What powers am I using to recall it? Where do these powers come from? This is the list of ingredients that you use to create your inner self-concept. You might then want to open up beliefs or ingredients that you want to include and contemplate other ways these in your life. The fact is that an invisible list involves a catalog of inexplicable miracles that you take for granted every day. Your inner self-concept tells you what you believe your mind is and what it's incapable of as well. You know your mind, that invisible ghost in the machine, is unfathomable, but you also know that there are certain limits to what it can do. Have you ever considered how you are creating your life with this inner self-concept list of ingredients? If it seems interesting to consider some changes, then listen on. Changing your concept of yourself. If you would like to become a person who has the capacity to have all of your wishes fulfilled, it will become necessary for you to move to that higher plane of existence where you are a co-creator of your life. This means that you'll need to undertake what is often presumed to be the difficult task of changing your concept of yourself. Recall that your concept of yourself is everything that you believe to be true about your inner and outer self. Those beliefs have created the life you're now living at what I call an ordinary level of awareness. To move into the extraordinary place that I'm speaking about here requires you to change what you believe is true. This can be a laborious project and an undertaking that, in my experience, very few people are eager or willing to take on. I have written this book to give you some very specific guidance and help in doing just that. I'll be quoting a man by the name of Neville Goddard, who wrote and spoke to large audiences in America under the solitary name of Neville. A popular speaker on metaphysical themes from the late 1930s until his death in 1972, Neville authored 10 books in which he captured the sheer logic of creative mind principles. His work has impacted me in a very profound way. In fact, he's been a great mentor to me in the past few years. Neville writes in a style that many might find strenuous to interpret, yet I find his teachings congruent with much of my earlier writing on manifestation and co-creation. That being said, Neville's teachings add a dimension that I hadn't really contemplated in depth until now. While studying his book, The Power of Awareness, I began blending many of Neville's teachings with other great thinkers' ideas, revising and refining his unique personal theology into a praxis that feels to me as meant for the world we inhabit today. After giving each of my 8 children a copy of The Power of Awareness, they individually expressed a variation of this. I love his ideas, Dad, but I have to read each paragraph over and over, and I have to stop to think about what he's saying. I know he's right, and it makes perfect sense, but I need it explained more, explained in words that I can understand. And their comments fueled my desire to share many of Neville's ideas, most of which are compatible with my own, and create a synthesis addressing the power you have to fulfill your 21st century wishes. I want to share with you my sense of what this great teacher's ideas can do for you, as they have done for me. I know that Neville wouldn't mind because he freely allowed students and audience members to tape his talks without charge. His tapes continue to informally spread his message today, and I've listened to them while preparing to write this book. I feel as like a kindred spirit to Neville, since I too have had the same policy during my entire speaking career and have been immersed in the same kind of spiritual inquiry as this great teacher who preceded me by a single generation. Here is what Neville had to say regarding changing your self-concept in order to elevate your life. Quote, if you refuse to assume the responsibility of the incarnation of a new and higher concept of yourself, then you reject the means, the only whereby your redemption, that is, the attainment of your ideal, can be achieved. Unquote. Get this clearly in your head in this first chapter. A higher concept of yourself involves taking on new truths and shedding your own views of what you can achieve. This is the only way you can achieve your desires. That's the reason I'm stressing this early in this book. You must begin by replacing your old set of truths with a belief in the existence of a higher self within you. This is something that you may not have contemplated at an earlier time in your life. Your concept of yourself, that includes any limitations, can be revised by you and only by you. Nothing I say or write will do that for you. I have done it for myself, and I can assist you along this path. But it is your decision to change that creates the possibility of change within you. A new and higher concept of yourself may be shocking and perhaps even be rejected by you, depending on the amount of conditioning you have absorbed throughout your life. That is for you to ponder and contemplate in the next 2 chapters. At this point, simply allow yourself to imagine that you can create a new and higher concept of yourself. Resistance is what will almost immediately appear for most people. And I encourage you to recognize the resistance within yourself. Overcoming resistance. Making the transition from the level of ordinary consciousness to the level of super consciousness involves a fundamental renewal, a dramatic change of personality. Very few are prepared to commit to this fulfillment of their divine purpose. What I'm inviting you to do, if you wish to be truly fulfilled, is to overcome your resistance to including all that you are in your earthly life. You have the ability to enter higher regions so as to consciously fulfill your highest desires here, now, and for the greater benefit of all. This is akin to doing a somersault and landing in a new reality, a reality in which all things are possible, a reality where you no longer identify yourself with all of those cultural memes and mind viruses that were programmed into you as a young person, preparing you for an ordinary life. You begin this exciting adventure of changing your concept of yourself by being willing to die to your present self. That's right. By relinquishing your personal history as the arbiter of your life, you cease to resist your fuller potential. You simply no longer choose to form your identity on the basis of what you've been taught. Remind yourself that everything you believe to be true has brought you to this point where you want to explore rather than resist your higher powers. Years ago, while reading Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich, I recall him saying that there's one distinguishing characteristic of those who live life at a higher level with a richness that's not just about monetary gain. It's that these unique and rare individuals have a burning desire to succeed. Now, a burning desire is much different from a regular wish or desire because it burns inside. And once ignited, it never goes out, regardless of what transpires. This is a quality that I know well. Often it feels like an obsession, and I've been labeled obsessive many times in my lifetime. Yet it hasn't been a curse because it has always served me in the fulfillment of whatever yearning I felt inside of me. I often think of it as an inner candle flame that never flickers, though the worst goes before me. All transformation begins with an intense, burning desire to be transformed. An inner knowing, along with a burning desire, is the prerequisite for becoming a person capable of manifesting his or her heart's desire. In The Power of Awareness, Neville emphatically explains that to be transformed, the whole basis of your thoughts must change. But your thoughts cannot change unless you have new ideas for you to think from your ideas. How do you find the way to ideas that will help you change your thoughts? Start by saying and writing an affirmation that appeals to you. Create your unique, heartfelt affirmation, such as, I have a burning desire, an inner flame that will not be extinguished by outer forces, to know and live from higher regions, to be transformed so that my new concept of myself will no longer include any limitations. I am willing to challenge and change any thoughts that impede my having a higher vision of myself. Before closing this introductory chapter, it will be helpful to explore your beliefs about the nature of those things we call thoughts and how to change them. Do you really think? No one has ever been able to say from whence a thought comes or what the thought is made up of. It's generally accepted that we think up things and we make up all of our own thoughts. But to be perfectly honest, for a large portion of my life, I held these same views on thoughts originating with each individual. But at this juncture, I tend to see the entire process as much more of an act of observation, contemplation, and choice. I enjoy noticing that I have a continuous stream of thoughts that come from who knows where. They have no boundaries to examine and apparently are unlimited in number and permutation. I think of the stock market ticker that runs along the bottom of a screen with each stock price representing a simple thought. You are capable of thinking many opposing thoughts in just a few moments, jumping helter-skelter from one idea to another, exhilaration, frustration, fear, ecstasy, worry, and so forth. You serve up an endless array of thoughts continuously from waking to falling asleep. Even while sound asleep, your mind continues observing, grabbing, and contemplating these omnipresent thoughts. There's very little respite from this mental thought-producing process throughout your entire lifetime. If you really believe that you are the creator of all of your thoughts and control the entire process, then simply stop. That's right, just try to stop thinking. You may be able to slow the stream of thoughts down considerably, but to simply stop thinking all day and stay in a thoughtless state is quite impossible. I'm suggesting you open your thought process to a new idea that will help you as you begin changing your concept of yourself. You can think of yourself as a divine, limitless being rather than a person who doesn't have a choice when it comes to your thoughts. Think of yourself as an observer, contemplating and selecting thoughts that you choose from that never-ending stream of thoughts on your inner screen, 24/7, 365. Watch thoughts stream by from wherever they originate and observe them rapidly transitioning and combining and appearing and then disappearing. Snatch a thought from the running ribbon of thoughts and contemplate it. As you toss it around, notice how you feel: sad, depressed, happy, frightened, so on. Every thought going by has an imprint on your concept of yourself. First, be the observer, and then the contemplator. Now become the choice maker, who can consciously decide to put that thought back onto the running stream and pick a different one, a thought that perhaps allows you to feel better. I am okay. I look fine. I will lose a few pounds. I am loved. I am divine. These, and millions more like them, are thoughts that you can opt for rather than the ones you've become accustomed to choosing in the past. This is how you begin a new process to change your concept of yourself. You accept as irrevocable, not you setting the stream of thoughts into motion, and that stopping thinking isn't possible at this stage of your evolution. At this stage, the essence of your being is to observe, contemplate, and then choose. This can all be done in a fraction of a nanosecond. The thoughts will keep appearing on your mental TV screen, just like the stock quotations, but you'll now be choosing the ones you want to focus on, gather, or just let go. I'm encouraging you to initiate a habit of choosing thoughts and ideas that support feeling good and powerful, and that elevate you to a higher level of consciousness where your self-concept welcomes your higher self. I love U.S. Anderson's description of this process in his book, 3 Magic Words. I leave you to contemplate it as you prepare to befriend that indwelling self that is desperately wishing to be fulfilled at the extraordinary level, rather than the ordinary where you have lived for far too long. And here's U.S. Anderson's quote. We have assured the indwelling self that it can be anything it accepts and has faith in, and we are now about to develop in it the habit of choosing only those thoughts and ideas that will constructively add good unto it. We are teaching ourselves to accept only good. We are deliberately compelling ourselves to accept all love, all kindness, all hope, all joy, all expansion, all abundance, all health, all vigor. We are deliberately compelling ourselves to reject all suffering, all sorrow, all depression, all morbidness, all inferiority, all aches and pains. We are saying nothing is true, great and the good and the beautiful. Only these will we add unto ourselves. Unquote. This is your new way of choosing thoughts that will introduce you to what I am calling your highest self, keeping uppermost in mind that if you want to accomplish something, anything, you must first expect it of yourself. And here are 3 suggestions to implement the words of this first chapter. 1, redefine your self-concept by challenging everything that you've held to be true about yourself up until now. Be open to examining everything you've previously thought limited you in any way. Affirm, I place no limits and no restrictions on all that I intend to accomplish and become from here on in. 2, allow yourself to become aware of the non-physical reality that you are a part of. Reach out to the angels or occupants of this higher invisible plane. Know that you can access guidance from those who've lived here before. Spend time in meditation, accessing the feelings of a plane of higher consciousness. And 3, whenever you're experiencing discomfort or sadness, rather than trying to change the thought behind your emotional state, instead, just put it back onto the never-ending conveyor belt of thoughts, and then select a different one. Keep doing this until you've selected a thought that allows you to feel good, and you're no longer condemning yourself for creating unhappy thoughts. Chapter 2, Your Higher Self. The display quote from Carl Jung. From the beginning, I had a sense of destiny, as though my life was assigned to me by fate and had to be fulfilled. This gave me an inner security, and though I could never prove it to myself, it proved itself to me. I did not have this certainty. It had me. For the past 18 months or so, I've been deeply involved in the study of what is known as initiatic science, the principal goal of which is to help the initiate, the student, meaning you and me, know and trust in the higher self. These ancient teachings repeatedly explain that emphasizing only the needs of our physical self and ignoring the needs of the higher self results in the soul and the spirit suffocating and dying of hunger and thirst. The initiates of old insisted on the importance of the knowledge of the higher self because this awareness opens up possibilities for growth and progress, and yet the ability to have one's own wishes. Perhaps it's difficult to imagine yourself so divided as to produce both a higher and a lower self. Very likely this idea of a self within yourself, which is higher than what you think of as your real self, is foreign to your way of thinking. I have long referred to this lower self or the false self as the ego, a part of you that believes you're defined for what you own or what you win. It's a belief that whatever status you've accumulated is proof that you're a separate being possessing particular strengths or limitations.
All right, guys.
It probably isn't a surprise that I suggest there are different beliefs that can and will put you on the path of happiness.
I'm going to go ahead and stop this here. Not because the rest of the book is not important, but I feel like the important part was kind of already given. And so, like I said, I want you guys to listen to this 4 times in 1 month. If you can do it more, do it more. You know, I just sat here and listened to that with y'all. It was no big deal. I had already heard it, but listening to it again, I did pick up some other things, you know, a couple things I kind of missed. You know, that's just the way your brain works. Couple things just made more sense to me too after I listened to it a couple, you know, the second time. So, anyway, I'm gonna move on, and obviously, you guys can always come back, and I'm gonna keep putting up, you know, information like this that just, I'm telling you, You will be a superhuman being if you continue listening to my videos here on my page. And not only that, I'm gonna give you a few laughs too. Y'all check out some of my stuff. It's pretty wild. Um, don't forget to donate. Do not forget to donate. I said, don't forget to donate. And thank you for coming back and hanging out with RAMO RETRAC. I'm out of here.